Okay, it's 6:03 in what I hope will be the last wartime briefing uh, of Zoom briefings. Um, Hopefully, with the good news actually taking place, and hopefully, I won't say with peace breaking out, but a lack of warfare, um, we'll start doing these maybe once a month and maybe on a thematic basis. So every month we'll try to deal with a different theme, although, of course, news in Israel continuously changes. We'll probably have elections coming up at some point, and that'll bring its own drama and own discussions, not to mention any one of a number of other things that we're not expecting. We weren't expecting the last 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. I don't know which. What do you want to start from? COVID, from judicial reform, or just the war? Any part of it, none of it expected, none of it was on any of our dance plates for these years. In any case, um, it's by and large almost a different country than it was a week ago. Obviously, physically, not a lot has changed, although physically, reservists have pulled back in Gaza. Some have actually left. Some uh, some army units that have been fighting nonstop for 2 years have now pulled out. All that is good. Most importantly, we're waiting on pins and needles for the return of the hostages, hoping that absolutely nothing goes wrong. It's been a day of rumors, rumors, reports. Telegram this, another channel says that. It's reported in Saudi Arabia this, and it's been going on and off all day long. What seems to have been going on was there was some attempt by Hamas to get some additional concessions in return for moving forward the release and releasing them today instead of tomorrow. That obviously did not happen, although we don't know what could happen tonight. As of right now, the expectation is that the release will be in the early morning hours of tomorrow morning. What early morning hours mean exactly? It clearly will be after dawn. I don't think they want to do this at night. And so we're probably talking, I don't know, dawn. Dawn seems to be around 6:30ish here, around something like that at this point. 6:30 in the morning. Um, so maybe it'll start around then. We don't know yet. Supposedly, Hamas is meeting with the representatives of the Red Cross in the next coming hours to work out the details of the release. They stated that they've now they've been not only in touch, but they've now concentrated all 20 living hostages in. It's not clear if it's in one place or a few places, but ready for release. So everything is waiting, everything is ready. Anticipation, of course, amongst the hostage families is the highest. Um, it's not clear that any of us believe this was ever going to happen, to be honest with you. It really was unclear. Um, 2 weeks ago, if you would have told me this was going to happen, I would not have been willing to put money on it. But like everything else this year, we've been wrong about so much. This has happened because of President Trump and because of Israel's failed strike on Qatar. But that also is what got President Trump moving in a serious sort of way. Um, I know it's a split and it's a difficult thing. And I've been writing about this a couple of times. As you all know, I'm not one of President Trump's great fans. I think what he's doing in the United States domestically is a disaster. But no other president could have pulled this off, in my
Please raise the
opinion.
volume. The volume is very low.
Volume is very low. Okay. If I can raise the volume, I'll just get closer to the. Oh, wait, I can raise the volume. Any better? Paul, who spoke up, is it any better?
Thank you.
Yes, it's
Yes, thank you.
better.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Um, okay, so no other president could have pulled this off, in my opinion. Both because Netanyahu has all in with Trump. Everything he stands for is Trump, 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 Trump. If Trump suddenly came against Israel, he would have nothing. He would have nothing to run on. He would have nothing to discuss. He would be really politically in deep trouble, and Israel would be in deep trouble at this point. And quite clearly, Israel is um, quite alone in the world right now, with the exception of the United States. And in the United States, it comes down to Trump more than anything else, um, both because the Democrats where they are, and plus, I think what's holding a lot of the Republicans to being pro-Israel is again Trump, because no one in the Republican Party goes against Trump. So Netanyahu couldn't afford to say no to Trump. There's no question about it. And Trump, on the other hand, has this weird relationship with Qatar and some of the other Arab states where he's willing to give them what no other president would ever be willing to give them. And Turkey, F-35s to Turkey, which the United States was not going to give them because they bought Soviet air defense systems. Give Qatar the defense agreement that Trump gave them. And of course, Qatar gives to Trump what no other president would ever receive. So it works both ways. The result being what Qatar gets from Trump is much more important to them than supporting Hamas ultimately, or supporting all of Hamas's needs. So as a result, the Qataris and the Turks were willing to pressure Hamas to accept what is for Hamas a suboptimal deal. And Trump was able to force Netanyahu to accept what is clearly a suboptimal deal for Netanyahu. Not necessarily for Israel, although probably too, but mostly for Netanyahu, it's clearly a suboptimal deal. Of course, successful negotiations usually take place when neither side is happy. So that's, there are no successful negotiations where both, everybody's happy. That's, very unusual. Let's put it that way. And in this case, um, it's a good thing that no one was happy on some levels. Now, why is this not a great deal for Netanyahu? First and foremost, for the scenes we're seeing in Gaza. Immediately after Israel pulled out, suddenly all these poor civilians suddenly put on military uniforms and suddenly marching in the streets of Gaza, a Hamas military. Now, are they a threat to Israel now? Of course not. Are they going to be a threat to Israel in the near term? Of course not. Could they be a threat to Israel in the long term? Of course. But so can, Hamas people also in all sorts of places. Hamas has been causing damage to Israel since the 1990s, and we've not been able to wipe them out. So let's keep that in mind. So the complete victory that Netanyahu has been promising is clearly not happening. It never was going to happen. It's not even clear if he ever wanted it to happen, because the question is, the same reasons that he supported Hamas to begin with, do they still exist? Both the issue of separating out the West Bank from Gaza, whatever Qatari money is involved, which we don't really understand. So we don't really understand what Netanyahu wants in terms of Hamas. But what he didn't get was total victory. And he wasn't going to get total victory. No one really expected it, except some of his most rabid supporters who kept on repeating total victory. What we did get was a couple of things. Number one, we're getting back, and the big number one, we're getting back all the hostages. That is really a biggie. And we're getting back all the hostages, without pulling fully out of Gaza. In other words, we're still going to be in 45, 50, depending on exactly how you calculate it, percent of Gaza. Most of it, the parts that are not really heavily inhabited. Some of it were once inhabited and today are not inhabited, and we've destroyed mostly. But we're still there, and it's additional leverage for the next stage of negotiations. Now, what's one of the biggest problems of the next stage of negotiations? Well, guess what? After President Trump comes here tomorrow in this lightning visit, I'm very impressed, a man of 78 years old and wonderful health. I understand he runs 10 miles a day, but in any case, is going to fly across the world, spend 4 hours on the ground in Israel. After his 4 hours in Israel, which will include meeting Prime Minister Netanyahu, meeting President Herzog, and then addressing the Knesset, and that Knesset speech should be interesting. We'll talk about that in a minute. After doing those things, he's then going to get on his plane and take it down to Sharm el-Sheikh. Awaiting him there are the leaders of all the Arab countries, and Turkey. and many of the European leaders. What are they there to discuss? The future of Gaza and a greater future of the Middle East after this war, etc., etc. Who is not going to be at that meeting? One people, us. Israel is not going to be at the meeting taking place at Sharm el-Sheikh to discuss the future of Gaza. Why? Because we never had a plan for the future of Gaza, and we waited for the United States and the Arabs together to come forth with their plan. Now, there's talk about how this plan was originally an Israeli plan, and yes, part of it was clearly originally an Israeli plan, but it was hijacked by Trump together with the Arab foreign ministers when they had that meeting 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, at the United Nations, and it became the Arab Trump plan for Gaza after the war. And so that's the plan, and it's going forth. And we have limited input, to say the least, only via the United States. Only via the United States. I repeat, we are not going to be there. Now, that's not good. Let's put it that way. And I think as much as Netanyahu may on one hand be liked by Trump, there are issues there as well. It was quite interesting last night. There's a big deal made of the fact that at the rally, when Witkoff was met with absolute adulation, screams and yells, and he could be elected prime minister tomorrow here. He's Jewish, so he could even do it. As opposed to Netanyahu, who can't be elected in the United States because he wasn't born there. We could elect Witkoff. He could make Aliyah tomorrow morning. We can elect him prime minister next week. He was total adulation at the Hostage Square last night. I should mention this was not the first time he was there. He's been there many times over the last year. Again, showing the emotions that our government hasn't been able to show.
Else or just me?
Excuse me?
Sorry, you froze on my.
So, Witkoff is extremely popular, to say the least. Jared Kushner was very, very popular, as was Ivanka. They were all received with great adulation, cheers, clapping, everything you want to think about. Of course, when they mentioned Netanyahu, the boos went up. Now, the Kurds made a big deal about the boos, how it was in bad taste and everything, as if it was planned. It was a pavilion response from a group of people who've been coming to the square. I mean, there was a much bigger crowd, obviously, but have been coming to the square for almost 2 years now. And for 2 years, it felt the government has been ignoring them, despite the fact that they came week after week. And it's made by, the name of the person who was booed never once made it to the square. So was it politically correct to do it? Probably not. But it represents the feeling of a lot of people. But the United States government were the ones who seemed to care. And in the end, it was the United States government who came in and ended this war and got back the hostages. It's an amazing thing when you think about it, right? In other words, it was the American government who put together a plan with the Arab states, and Israel's been outside of that plan. It's been forced on Israel to accept the plan. And now they're meeting, and they're going to start discussing Gaza for the day after. Now, Luke, the overall skeleton of the plan that was discussed by the Arab foreign ministers and prime ministers with Trump 2 weeks ago, and the plan that's been put forth, the skeleton of that plan is good. However, like everything else in the world, the devil is in the details. And the devil is in the details, and we're not having input into the details. Instead of having a plan that we would have come up with a year and a half ago that said, as we pulled out of this area, there would be a pan-Arab force led by the redone Palestinian Authority, or whoever it might be, that we would work with together, and they would take over every area that we left. Didn't exist. And instead, we're depending on something to be developed that hasn't been developed yet, and not to mention the fact that it's going to be twice as hard for anyone else to go in there now that Hamas is reestablishing control as it would be if they would just come in and replace us as we pulled out. But again, for political reasons, this government was unable to come up with a plan until now. So there'll be a meeting. We don't know what's going to come of the meeting. We don't know what the vision will be. I just want to make that at one point I lost in my thought for a moment. When when Netanyahu was booed, despite whatever the report said, I mean, looking carefully, you could see both Witkoff and even much more so Jared Kushner were humored by it. It wasn't they were embarrassed. It wasn't they were surprised. They were humored by it, especially Jared Kushner, who knows Netanyahu well. He was humored by the response of the crowd, which one could have bet was going to happen. But in any case, leave that part aside. The problem is, where's our input going forward? What's going to happen going forward? Um, I don't think on some levels, the idea that Hamas was going to disappear was just not realistic. The question is, can they be starved out of existence over the coming years? I don't know. Do they have the um, support of the people of Gaza now to, in some form or another, continue any form of resistance? They have guns. They can try to maintain control over the people in Gaza. As we've seen so far, they have managed to kill, or I don't know if they killed all of them, but the two of the three main clans that were opposing them last night, they supposedly massacred the members of the clan, including some of the women and children. We don't know all the details of that yet. So we don't really know. But we'll have to see. But they're going to maintain control, I think, unless something else happens. There is no such thing as a vacuum. And with no vacuum, it means that they will fill the vacuum. And we'll just have to deal with that fact. So there'll be a Gaza. There'll be some form of a international control of some kind that'll be minimal, with the Hamas probably calling the shots from behind the scenes. We don't know. But there's no reason to think not. The only optimistic reason to think not is that maybe the people of Gaza concluded after this terrible war that armed resistance against Israel is not really a good idea. And that maybe, again, we won't be occupying Gaza when this all ends. Maybe making the best of their lives in Gaza, and for those who want to leave, they can leave. But those who want to make the best of their lives in Gaza and give up their dream of returning to Jaffa, wherever, is the right thing to do. And maybe we can get rid of this United Nations situation where 5 generations are still refugees. The only situation in the world where that takes place. So maybe there's hope for that in the future, and maybe there's hope for rebuilding Gaza in a different sort of way. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to be very, very difficult. There's so many details that are going to need to be dealt with. It's going to require a competent government, something, on our side, which we just don't have. One of the newscasters last night made a comment that I thought was very real, and it's something that goes back to the whole war. He said, in 24 hours, maybe it's 48 hours, but sometime really, really soon, foreign news media is going to get into Gaza, and they're going to be taken around by Hamas, and Hamas is going to show them every building that was blown up and the people who died in each building one by one, dragging it out, maybe finding a body or two under the rubble here and there. And is Israel ready to explain why these buildings were blown up? Now, one commentator said there was no reason, there's no explanation because sometimes there was no reason. But in many cases, there were good reasons. But are we ready to deal with it? Are we planning to deal with it? Are we planning to deal with the information campaign that's going to be against us because it's going to come out of once we pull out of Gaza? Or, it opens up for foreign media? I don't see any sign of it. I don't really expect it. So, and again, we'll keep on making the same mistakes again and again and again. It's not the old Einstein thing where you repeat what you failed at, you just don't do. So I guess that's one way of repeating what you failed at. Just don't do, just don't plan, don't do anything in terms of trying to explain what happened and where it goes. A lot of other things, what things are going to change here, we don't know. This is the first time in now it'll be 3 some odd years where on Saturday nights there won't be a reason for people to go out and protest. Instead, they can go out and have fun. It's the first time, certainly since the war has begun, that I won't say we've never gone out to eat, because obviously we have, and we've even gone to a play or two over the last 2 years, one or two concerts. We haven't sat home and, all the time, although the diary does sort of limit our flexibility, but leave that part aside. But every time we go out and try to have a little bit of relaxation and fun, there's this guilt. Every time I've left the country in the last 2 years to visit my grandkids or do some speaking or whatever it might be, there's a certain level of guilt of leaving. How can I leave while soldiers are fighting in Gaza, etc.? That's part of everybody. It's not just me. It's everybody in the country. There's that guilt and the feeling that, you're leaving, you're going away when you shouldn't be. You should be worrying about, that's suddenly going to be gone. That burden is suddenly going to be gone from everybody. Now, I saw it over the weekend, obviously. This Saturday night, obviously last night was, the most uh, the most people out on the streets, but of course that was because so many people came in from different parts of the country for the demonstration rally. But Thursday night is a big night for people going out in Tel Aviv. Thursday night was the busiest Thursday night that I can remember since the war began. People were all out. People were enjoying themselves. Is Tel Aviv going to return to the Tel Aviv that once was? I don't know. Tel Aviv used to be the city that never stopped, and places were open all night. Most of those places are no longer open all night. Is some of that going to come back? I imagine it will. I imagine, there's even a chance tourists might return. I don't know. I don't expect it next week, but there's been no tourists in this country now for 2 years at least. I mean, yes, there's the occasional people who coming show the solidarity on missions or volunteering, etc. But standard tours of tourists who come to see the sights, um, you know, uh, Paris gets 40 million visitors a year. We were barely getting 2 million in the good days. Um, so will tourism come back? I'm sure it will slowly. It's still an expensive location, but I think tourists will come back. Those people in the tourist industries will get their jobs back, some of them. That will all happen and that'll change. Will the boycotts against Israel disappear? Not totally, but I think to a large extent. Certainly the national boycotts, the countries that stopped, all of a sudden announced they weren't going to buy Israeli arms, they'll be back. Because our arms are better than anyone else's by a factor. So those arms sales that were canceled will probably be reinstated in the coming weeks or months, and a lot more sales are going to come following this. Israel will not be as isolated. Now, the way we really won't be isolated is if we start down a path, a very, very, very long path, and I say that, towards some sort of future for the Palestinians. It's not an immediate future, but if we start some long-term plan, if we have a plan, that's a good start, by the way, having a plan, then that will change things drastically. Is it possible? Not with this government, but this government, I don't think will be in power for that much longer. In the best, worst case scenario, there'll be elections in a little over a year. Could this government win again? Can Netanyahu win again? I certainly wouldn't write him off. He is the best politician in Israel's history. I think he's the worst leader in Israel's history, but he's the best politician without a shadow of a doubt. And so when making tactical political decisions in literally politics, not national politics, but tactical political decision, he's the best politician, and one cannot write him off ever. So there's always a chance it could win again. I don't think so. I don't know. He has tried so hard, and his whole goal is to say that he's not responsible for October 7th, and therefore, look, I just brought about victory, but it's soon going to be clear that total victory we didn't have. October 7th is suddenly going to be remembered. Wait a second, this all began on October 7th, and you were prime minister. Everyone else has resigned. Not the government people, but all the military people, the Shin Bet people, the intelligence people, everyone else has resigned who had anything to do with October 7th. Not on every level, but many, many levels. The government is the one at level that has not resigned. So we'll see. Maybe Maybe people will remember at some point. The problem is amongst his supporters, they all say, yeah, he was responsible for October 7th, and yeah, he's maybe not the greatest, but who can replace him? And I basically say, anybody. That's the reality, and leave everything aside. And I won't get into the potential corruption, and I won't go into his ideology. I won't get into anything else. I strongly believe that any leader that's been in power for so many years needs to move on. Doesn't matter where. I think what was done in the United States after President Roosevelt was elected for the fourth term, which was an amendment to the Constitution that said that no president can serve more than two consecutive terms. No, two terms, excuse me, not consecutive. Two terms was the right decision. Until Roosevelt ran again, it was accepted that presidents would only run twice. That was because George Washington did that, and no one else violated the norms. Roosevelt, for whatever reason, it was the middle of the war and he had good reasons, he violated those norms. But then it was clear, A, he was too old. When he became president the fourth time, he was already sick, and maybe Yalta might have turned out a little differently if he hadn't gone to Yalta, if he was somebody else. But in any case, the United States has an amendment, term limits, so to speak. Israel needs that as well. Anything more than 8 years, you should not become prime minister anywhere in the world. It's bad. Putin is obviously very bad for the same sort of reasons. But the problem with any president, prime minister, leader, is when you stay in power for so long, you forget, you think you are the country and the country is you. You forget that you're just there serving the people, and you are not essential. And anyone else can, not anyone, but most people can, a lot of people can take your job, which is the other part of it, by the way. And the real problem with Netanyahu, besides everything else, is the fact that he made sure there aren't any really good people to take over for him, certainly from the Likud, and didn't develop the next generation of leaders. And the most important thing that a leader can do is help develop the next generation of leaders. Okay, we're at 6:30 at questions. I heard the questions in the chat, but let's are the Palestinians going to be there at Sharm? I don't think so, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure the Palestinians are going to be at Sharm. At least I haven't heard. Okay. Well, we have someone who's been gone for the last couple of weeks. He's atop on my list here, Paul. So Paul gets the first question in honor of the fact that he's returned to us. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mark, so you've, in my understanding, dismissed Hamas as a powerful force, but I think every cancer starts small and then grows over time. And just I'm very concerned that assuming they stay, and you just told me they killed all these clan people, so my guess is Hamas is staying there. Uh, Over time, they will grow back, either through bribery or cajolery or whatever. They will smuggle in, weapons and building materials, etc. And in X number of years, we'll be back where we were. Am I being overly pessimistic?
Okay, you're not being overly pessimistic. It's a possibility. Can't say it's not a possibility. It's something that could clearly happen. However, again, one of the things we failed to realize is two things. First of all, there were a number of different proposals over the years beforehand to eliminate the top leadership of Hamas and to preemptively attack them. Netanyahu refused to approve any of those plans. Why? I don't know. Maybe we'll never know. He claims because the world wouldn't have allowed it, that there wasn't consensus. Obviously, any of those things don't stand up to what happened on October 7th. Second of all, remember something. October 7th only occurred because we were sleeping at the wheel. We were sleeping at the wheel. There was practically no one at the border. We will never again sleep at the wheel. Now, that doesn't mean that something else might not happen. Look, it took 50 years, 50 years from the Yom Kippur War to this war, literally 50 years exactly, for us to be surprised on a strategic/tactical basis. I am sure in the next 50 years, if the country survives and all goes well, that something else will happen. But I don't think it's going to be for Hamas. I think our biggest threat right now is still Iran, and some threat we don't even know about. again, if we somehow make peace with the Palestinians in 10 years or 15 years, that's an horizon that I think is possible if we plan for it, then, people don't stay at war forever. And maybe we will always stay at war forever, but hopefully not. Um, we'll have to see. But again, we have to be worried. We have to be concerned. We have to make sure we still have an army. Maybe we can replace all our army with robots. Certainly possible. Instead of Haredim, we'll get robots. They're probably more efficient, but we'll leave that part aside. It'll take another 5 years or so. But um, again, we can't always um, we can't always worry, or we have to be concerned about it. That's not, it's not your and my job. The people in military intelligence and military planning need to be worried about these things and make sure these things don't happen. Brian.
Hi. I've just got a couple of questions. The first relates to the plan appears to suggest that Hamas will be disarmed, and um, I suspect you're quite skeptical about whether that's going to be achieved or not. We already seem to see, I've seen a report that Hamas is already hunting down it's those who've crossed it over the last period of time and have started killing civilians in or clans people, whatever, in Hamas in Gaza. So I wonder whether you might kind of address that whether the whole issue of disarmament is kind of dead. And my second question relates to what happens, what the to um, the energy that the hostage families have put in over the last couple of years. I can see it being very difficult to sort of stand down. And I wonder if you've got any views about whether people from who've led those protests over the last couple of years might emerge and redirect their energies, because I can see it being very difficult just to kind of after a period of welcoming family members back or grieving or whatever, simply going away. It's difficult to have, with all that adrenaline flowing for 2 years, to simply go back to your normal life. And I just wonder whether you have any thoughts on what might happen with that protest movement.
Okay, so I think firstly you need to think of two things. First of all, there wasn't just this protest movement for um, to get the hostages back. Prior to that, there was the protest movement against the judicial overhaul that the Likud was trying to put forth. And in both those cases, it's created some sets of leaders that may or may not become active and stay active going forward. There are people in the high tech world who, until the judicial overhaul began, basically were not getting involved at all in politics. Their view was, well, we'll just worry about making money. We'll worry about getting our companies forward, going public, making billions of dollars, literally in some cases. And the politics will be left to the politicians. They realized at some point that they couldn't do that. And some of them became involved in politics, or at least in the anti-judicial reform, people like Eyal Waldman and people like that. Um, will they all remain involved? It depends. It's really going to depend on how this election works out. The people who want to get involved will have the method of doing so in the coming elections. Um, I fear that certainly, as it stands right now, a choice is going to be between, existing group of politicians. There's no new leader that's going to emerge, at least as of right now, from the protest movement, from the hostage families. There are potential leaders going forward. There are people who've turned out to be very eloquent, with charisma, and some of those people I think will find homes in the political world. Um, the problem, of course, is that the the parties have their own interests at heart. And what really needs to happen in this country is a total overhaul of their electoral system. And that's not likely to happen unless someone really plans a real revolution, so to speak. So I don't really have a good answer. I think a lot of the a lot of the power that's been developed over the last 2 years and 3 years at this point, I think will be redirected into this political system, um, into the elections coming forth. But how it's going to work its way out, I still don't know. I truly don't. We'll have to see. And as to the first part with the question of disarming, look, of course, one of the first questions is how you define disarming. That was left pretty gray. So does it mean they can't have any rockets? I think that would be considered something they can't have. Does it mean they can't have Kalashnikovs? Well, I don't think that's something we're going to be able to take away. We haven't succeeded in doing that in the West Bank in all these years. Somewhere in between, I think that will be problematic. So we'll have to see. I don't believe we're going to end up, basically Netanyahu says we're going to go back and fight and do it if we have to. I don't believe that we will go back and fight, even if they don't disarm. We will limit their abilities, and Trump is certainly not going to allow us to go back and fight unless Hamas really violates this thing in a big way, and that would only be by not giving back the hostages. That's the only really big thing that he really cares about. So that's where that stands. Okay.
I have a question, Mark.
Go ahead.
With supposedly the large amounts of money and funds that Hamas was getting through Qatar, through Israel, is that going to be cut off? And do you see that as being significant?
Hamas is going to know. Gaza is going to be rebuilt with Qatari money, it looks like. That's really a problem. I mean, Qatar has hosted Hamas all these years. We made all excuses. We'd rather have them where we know where they are, et cetera, et cetera. But Qatar is a supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood. Qatar is a radical, it's a strange place, Qatar. Let me put it that way. There's no other way of defining it. A country that is trying to be modern but supports the Muslim Brotherhood. A country that is more fanatically religious than Saudi Arabia, but is also trying to be modern and hosted the World Cup. I don't even know how to eat Qatar. Qatar has been spending billions of dollars in the U.S., influencing U.S. campuses, creating a lot of ill will for Israel over the years on American campuses, excuse me. And they have the money to help rebuild Gaza. And we won't know where that money is going totally. And I'm sure some of it will go to rebuild the military of Hamas, probably. And some of it's been going to Israeli politicians. Look, the fact of the matter is, in any other government, if the closest aides to the prime minister in the time of war were found to be on the payroll of what is considered by and large an enemy state, do you think that the prime minister wouldn't be forced to resign immediately? I mean, only in this country. Literally, his closest advisors, and it's not a question whether they received money and they were on the payroll of Qataris. The question is why they were receiving the money. There are all sorts of gray areas here. But in any normal situation, could you see the Prime Minister of Great Britain surviving such a situation like that? The Prime Minister of France? Any parliamentary democracy, could you see the Prime Minister surviving a week, a day? They'd be forced to resign. And because of the odd system that we have, that the members of the parliament have no independence whatsoever, the prime minister can go on as if nothing happened. So Qatari money is going to keep on going, and we'll have to see. Claude, go ahead.
Barghouti.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, what about Barghouti?
Well, you tell me, the Palestinians need somebody that they can look towards to lead them through this process.
Okay, my question is, I certainly years ago supported releasing Barghouti 20 years ago, 18 years ago, 15 years ago. What I have no idea, and therefore I can't give an opinion, is who is Barghouti after being in Israeli prisons for 20 years? Is he? No, I mean, I don't know. Is he a Nelson Mandela, or is he, a much more confirmed terrorist at this point? Does he believe in armed struggles to the very end? Now, there are people who might know that in the Israeli prison systems, in the Shabak. I don't know. They're not telling me. But that's the reality of who Barghouti is really determines whether it makes sense to release him or not.
Okay, so
Uh,
with no Barghouti, who's the option?
I don't know. The Palestinians need to figure that out. We can't figure that out for them. I'm sorry. That's not our job to figure out who
Right.
should lead the Palestinians. I mean, they've had a guy who's 80, what I think he's 88 now, 87, 88, not in great health. Uh, I mean, there's something wrong. I don't know what it's in the water of the world or whatever, but there are too many people who are too old who are leading countries. I mean, we had Biden, we have Trump, we have Putin now in his 70s. We have Abbas in his upper 80s. There's some guy in Africa in his mid 90s. I mean, there's something really wrong with that. I mean, I'm not trying to say at 60 you're done, but maybe at 75 it's time to no longer be the prime minister or
Oh,
president. Maybe it's
no.
time for a younger generation somewheres. I don't know. You can still be on the board, maybe even be a senator at 75, but president, prime minister? No. I'm sorry.
You need a constitution. Thank
We
you,
need, but sort of the
Mark
United
Brody.
States needs a constitutional amendment. The United States is the ones who has a age limit. Now, of course, back then people didn't live to beyond a certain age, so no one thought the United States would have presidents who are pushing 80. I mean, what is Trump going to be 82 when he finishes his term? Something like that, pretty close to that. I guarantee you that James Madison never thought there would be an 82-year-old president of the United States. Um, so
All right,
however good he is, and it's not
don't
relevant.
tell
Once again, I
Ben
don't want to
Frank.
get into his pluses and minuses, but 82 years old president of the United States, really? And Biden would have been what if he would have ran for re-election? He thought he could be president until 86 or something insane like that. What is wrong with people? I
Thank
mean,
you.
so Paul again, go ahead.
Yeah, so Mark, you haven't talked about Iran, and I know Iran is at least temporarily seems to be down and out, at least compared to what they were 6 months or a year ago. But I just cannot imagine them quietly going into that good night and not trying to help Hamas muck things up, whatever. What's your take?
Okay, two things to keep in mind. They're really down and out at the moment. That's number one. They're economically being strangled. The secondary sanctions that were now imposed, actually, at first people said it wouldn't make any difference. It doesn't matter, but now it turns out it does matter because third parties like India and others um, are not doing anything, stopping to do trading with them. It's beginning to really hurt even more. Their economy is in that desperate shape. They have no water. Global warming has affected them in a very direct way. They don't have Israel's desalinization plants. We would be in big trouble too if it wasn't for all the desalinization plants we have. Um, so with the economy, their military disaster, their air defenses don't exist. Their air force doesn't exist. Would they like to muck things up? I think they would, but they've lost their strategic ability. They have Syria is now an enemy of theirs. Therefore, they can no longer supply Hezbollah. Their ring that surrounded us doesn't exist. So there's nothing. In other words, part of the reason we never attacked Iran is we were afraid of Hezbollah, but they don't exist anymore. And we have our laser system is going online, and right now it'll only be good against short and medium range missiles. It will not be good, we don't think, against ballistic missiles. But I'm willing to put money right now that 5 years from now, the lasers will also be an effective weapon against ballistic missiles. So I don't think time is on their side. And, we keep on hoping there'll be a revolt there. I don't know. Maybe there will be. I don't know. But it's a question of how they can muck things up. What, are they going to start a war with us right now? That wouldn't make any sense. I mean, they could. I mean, I think they'll try a terror attack against some Israeli target in the world. That's more than likely. Will they start a surprise missile attack on us? I mean, I think certainly our missile defense systems are always ready for that sort of situation. Would it be good? No. Would it be bad for the economy? Of course. But they would be open for renewed attack by Israel very quickly and very effectively. So I don't see it. It's possible, but I don't see it. Howard?
Yeah, thank you. You were talking about Qatar a little bit ago, and their unique relationship with Hamas and with Bibi, evidently. What about the other states, particularly the Arab states, that will be in this meeting when Trump shows up? What are they likely to insist on or try to enforce when it comes to a rebuilding of Gaza and the defanging of Hamas?
Okay, so let's look at it from two perspectives. What would they want and what are they willing to do? So what do they want? They would actually want to defang Hamas. They probably don't want Hamas in power. Hamas, certainly for Egypt, that represents the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the biggest, been an opponent of the Egyptian government for all of these years. So Egypt would like Hamas to disappear. I would think they're a threat to almost all of the other Sunni states in some greater or lesser extent. So they would all like Hamas to disappear. However, are they willing to send their own troops to enforce it in some way or another? I doubt it. Are they willing to okay certain actions that might result in the long-term defanging of Hamas? I think they are. Question is how effective it's going to be. That's always the question. You can plan whatever you want, but will it be effective? And I don't know that they're willing to take actions that will actually be effective. They might be, but we just don't know. And look, I think the assumption has to be that we'll reach some sort of agreement that will eventually Israel will pull out to within a kilometer of the border. We'll keep an area immediately along the border area. There'll be a government in Gaza that will not be a Hamas government. It'll be run by some technocrats, etc. However, Hamas will remain there in the same way that Hezbollah is there in Lebanon, certainly before this war, and they will control many things behind the scenes. Look, one of the things that's happening, for instance, is they're getting all the aid so they can make all their money again. All the aid's going back through the UN. The centers that Israel set up are closed as of today or yesterday. And they'll get all this money and make all this money off of all the aid that's going to be pouring in and the control they'll have over the food and going forward. So again, it requires proactive action to take them away. And I just don't see the proactive action by people. That's the problem. It's not that they don't want it. Of course, no one wants Hamas. Everyone accepts the fact that what Hamas did on October 7th was atrocious, should not be allowed to continue. They should pay the price and not be in power. But anybody willing to take the real actions requiring that to happen? We were willing up to a point, but ultimately not. And so that's the question. Will these Arab states be willing to take additional actions that can result in removing of Hamas from power? We'll have to see. I'm not optimistic, but overall I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic as the war ends. That's the most important thing. The most important thing is I've written, we're not going to wake up in the morning to hear that another soldier has died. We're going to see the hostages sometime in the next 24 hours reuniting with their families. The bodies of the ones that are dead will come back, most of them tomorrow, but some of them over a period of a month or two, I would think, until they find them all. Our soldiers, a lot of them will demobilize. Our relations with the world will get better. Yes, there'll still be campus groups that'll protest against us, and there were groups that were trying to, the boycott, the BDS movement existed before this war, and it'll exist after this war. But what I don't see is any great support for the ceasefire, right? Yesterday in London, there were, I don't know, 50,000 people protesting the war. What were they protesting yesterday? I mean, so we'll have to see. Anti-Semitism in the United States will go down a little bit. It will never go to the pre-war levels. It's here to stay. It's a complicated story, and we'll discuss it at some point in another month or two. And I'll have a podcast with someone from ADL next week to discuss it further. But war changed things, but maybe we can get back a lot of what we lost. It's going to require a concerted effort. And again, it'll require a different government. Because once again, I go back to the single biggest problem with this government, it's incompetent. That's the single biggest problem. Whether Netanyahu himself is competent or not is one thing, but he's incompetent in terms of having ministers who know what they're doing and knowing how to make sure that the various cabinet ministries are working according to whatever plan. I'm quite sure he hasn't met with 60% of his cabinet even once to discuss how they're doing and if they're fulfilling the plans that their ministries don't have. So let's hope for the best. Okay, did I miss anything in the chat that I should answer? I see Jackie King, the president. Oh, what's the point of Israel having a president? Okay, so the president has a limited number of powers. One of them is the pardon power, something like the United States does. It's pretty much absolute, although it's usually has to be recommended by the Ministry of Justice. But ultimately, it's an absolute power that he does have. The president is also the person who calls on the winner of the what he perceives the winner of the election to form a government. What's the purpose? I think it does serve a purpose because the presidents have generally tended to be nonpartisan and have acted in a nonpartisan way, and they've sort of been at least one person who's by and large been above politics in many ways. And you need a figure like that. We've also seen that with Netanyahu being hated by a large part of the world, and of course being under indictment by the ICC, he can't travel to large parts of the world. That's a whole other question. But the president can. And so President Herzog has been able to travel abroad to different places and meet, and leaders have been willing to meet with him and talk to him. And that's also an advantage of having someone sort of part of the system, but outside the system, who can represent Israel. So that's the purpose of the presidency. It's a weak presidency. You can look around the world. There are various models of presidencies. The ultimate presidency is an American form of presidency, but you have a place like France where you have a stronger president than our president, has more powers, but still has a parliamentary system. The British Prime Minister also has more. There's no Prime Minister. There's a king, and the king is awfully similar to our president in the fact that the king almost never does anything and never gets involved in politics in any which way, but the king is the one who calls upon the prime minister to form a government. He can also bring down the government if he or she thinks it's really necessary. So I think ours is similar to a king without being a king, and of course non-hereditary. He gets elected I think it's 10 years, but in any case, gets elected every period of time. Okay, I want to thank everybody. I'm hoping, like I said, we'll do the next one in about a month and pick a topic of some kind or another. I'll try to get some of your feedbacks. I will continue with the daily in the same sort of way going forward. We'll change a little bit. Try to have some more long form articles, feature articles the course of the week, and some news articles and some feature articles. I'll also enforce a little more the paywall, the twice a week. The paywall will be higher since I've always thought the Tel Aviv Diary was also an important hasbara to get the word out of Israel. So every week when I try to decide where to put the paywall, I say, well, I don't want everyone not to read this article. I don't want to read this article. So I put it pretty low down. I'll be a little more aggressive twice a week because I need paid subscribers to keep this going. So do that. And I'm open to other suggestions. We'll cover a little more of American and world Jewry, issues of anti-Semitism in the world, a little deeper. I will also try to do, as opposed to right now, what I've been doing has been simple, the stories of companies that have been funded and going public, etc., to try to do some more in-depth looks at different Israeli companies and different Israeli technologies and directions that the government, that the Israeli economy and high tech is going. A little bit of concentration on AI, which, as some of you know, is one of my, I won't call it obsessions, or one of the areas that I'm most interested in. So AI in Israel and where that's going will also be a feature of what I hope to do in the coming weeks and months. Also give it some thought. This came suddenly. It's a good news. It's a good time to rethink and hopefully retool. And I'm also going to finally finish my book that's probably 80% finished, but I was never in a rush because it's supposed to end with this war. The war wasn't ending, so I didn't rush to finish. But now with the war ending, I need to finish the book. So, and all of you who are founding members, I promised a free copy. So thank you all for being here today.
That's a
And
threat. That's a
what?
threat. That's a threat.
Yes.
Threat.
Okay, so thank you all for
Thank
being here
you.
today, and
Thank you.
take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Bye.